Welcome to Mysterious Goings On. We're going to get right to the show after these messages. You know, I love podcasting. I have since 2006, back when you had to use like a Dixie cup with string to make the thing work. And that's why I'm so excited that we recently moved Mysterious Goings On to Anchor FM to record our podcast. I gotta tell you, I don't regret it a bit. If you haven't heard about Anchor, it's the easiest way to make a podcast. Let me explain. First of all, it's free. There's creation tools that allow you to record and edit your podcast right from your phone or computer. Anchor will distribute your podcast for you so it can be heard on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and many more. And you can make money from your podcast with no minimum listenership. It's everything you need to make a podcast all in one place. I'm not going to lie to you, when I first heard about Anchor, I was a little dubious because I've been doing it the hard way for so long. But I got to tell you, it's very easy. Use a Stripe account. Get sponsors. You're not paying monthly hosting fees. The sound quality is great. The distribution is phenomenal. Friends, download the free Anchor app today if you want to start your own podcast, or go to anchor.fm to get started. Remember, you heard it here first on Mysterious Goings On.
This is Michelle Cox. I'm the author of the Henrietta and Inspector Howard series, and you're listening to Mysterious Goings On.
In 1998, legendary sci-fi author Harlan Ellison responded to a challenge from Chris Carter, creator of The X-Files, to write a story based on this premise: the 102-year-old pregnant corpse. Well, one by one, in a window of a store, Harlan Ellison, a bookstore, started typing them. They were immaculately typed, spaced, and edited in his head long before his fingers hit the keys. And when the Dangerous Visions bookstore in Sherman Oaks, California closed that day, he had completed Objects of Desire in the Mirror Are Closer Than They Appear. Harlan Ellison got that inspiration from a French author, but we're not here to talk about Harlan Ellison, but we are here to talk about somebody who does something that absolutely fascinates me. It's one aspect of what this wonderful person does, and I want to talk about it. It's typewriter poetry, and that's why I'm really pleased to welcome to the show Rachel Noall. How are you?
I'm so well. Thank you so much for having me. And I wrote that 102-year-old pregnant corpse down so that I could write a short story for you later. So challenge accepted.
I love it. I love it. Rachel, I think when we connected initially, I expressed my chagrin and embarrassment that I had not really featured poets on the show.
You did. You mentioned that.
Yeah, 5 years, and maybe one dedicated poet, maybe two. But
Wow.
That's why I was so excited when we got connected, and I wanted to talk about that. So I'm going to just throw something out at you here. I'm not going to do the standard question of how did you start and all that stuff. We can get to that. Where is poetry today?
That is such an important question. And I'm so glad you asked it, because really, with the rise of social media, the landscape of poetry has changed incredibly. You know, when I was growing up and I had to read poetry for a lit class, I was like, this sucks. I am bored. Like, who understands this? Like, who sits in their house and like reads this for fun? You know, that was like my experience with poetry. And you know, now really, I mean, social media has done a few things to poetry, but it has made it way more accessible. You know, it's, you're scrolling through and it's kind of gives some levity to some of the stuff that you see online. And obviously, you know, it's usually shorter form, but you're really getting to see kind of the behind the scenes of poetry. And I think that has really led to a rise in conversations about writing and how you can discuss mental health and social issues. And, you know, we're seeing this across the board. I mean, the National Youth Poet Laureate spoke at the NFL Super Bowl. Like, in what world would that have happened 10 years ago? It wouldn't have happened, you know? So I think poetry has changed so quickly, and I just like love to be on the wave, like riding it, it's pretty cool.
I write genre fiction novels, things like that, and I've taken a stab at poetry throughout my life. Beyond the anguished teen years, of course, where I expressed my love to a young lady named Donna who didn't know I existed. But the point being, it's hard. I put this question to a writer a while back. I said, how long does it typically take you to write? Like he would do like segments, audio segments on a podcast. And I said, how long does it typically take you to write that? And he said if it's a 10-minute segment, about an hour. If it's a 6-minute segment, about 3 hours.
That's
right?
Not untrue.
I mean, seriously. So with poetry, let me put it to you right off the bat, do you have a concept in your head and you're trying to express it, or are you expressing words and then the concept bleeds through?
There are a couple things that I do. I think, so yesterday I wrote a poem about river rock. Yesterday, no one knows this other than my friends, but yesterday I went to Home Depot and I'm landscaping my front yard and literally bought 500 pounds of river rock. And I couldn't even push a cart by myself because I'm a pretty small human. But it was that thing that I was doing that day. And I was like, oh, this can make for some great imagery about the way water flows. And then sometimes it just comes from the things that I'm doing in my day-to-day life. Right. And sometimes I'm kind of just musing and playing with words or sounds, and a poem comes out of that may have nothing to do with what I'm going through in a particular day, but I'm like, oh, I like the story. I like where this is going. Let's see what happens. Because I know that doesn't really answer your question, but it totally kind of depends on the scenario, the weather outside. There's so many things that factor how I'm inspired on any given day.
I love that. No, and I apologize for it being somewhat of a nebulous question, but I think poetry is somewhat nebulous. But a couple of recent guests on the show, Scott Mikelson, Grammy balloted songwriter, I asked him about his process, and he literally writes down just snippets of things. He said, it can be stuff I read on the bathroom wall. It can be something I overheard in a restaurant. He just writes down sentences. Yeah. He did this. He saw something I wrote, just something crazy on Twitter, just a sentence. And he said, I'm stealing that. And you know why? And I'm like, one of these days, I'm going to hear that sentence reflected back at me. So I'm the same way, though. I'm currently working on my next book. And at the top of my draft pages, there's the working title and all that stuff, right? But there's these, if anybody didn't know me, just went in there and read that. Let's say I got hit by a bus and they go, oh, what is this? They open it up. There'd be all these little snippets of phrases, the word phlogiston. I mean, seriously. Yeah.
I like it.
Thank you. So what I do is I go back and I find those, and later I plug them in. So curiously, I'm wondering if that doesn't have some purchase with poetry, and I think it does.
Oh, it absolutely does. And something that I'll do is, I'm definitely a student of poetry. I have my master's in the craft. This is sitting on my desk, postmodern American poetry. I'm trying to read a lot of poetry. And when I'm doing that, there are words that I pick out or phrases or pieces of imagery, and I'll write them down on a list. And I actually, sometimes I do this exercise where, 26 letters in the alphabet, I'll just randomly Google letters that start with A. And I write the first word down that catches my mind. And then I have a word, 26 words, and I write 26 poems. And it's an exercise that I do in an hour and a half. And then I'll say out of 26 poems, you had to integrate the A word or the B word or the C word. And then out of 26, I usually have, 10 that I'm like, ooh, there's really something here. How can I play with this? So words for me you can really build a scene or a poem or a story, I imagine, out of a sequence of small words or a feeling,
This was inculcated in me as a little boy. My grandfather was wrote for 50 years. He wrote Westerns, but he loved words. He taught me what a palindrome was. He would just come up with doggerel. He would just say things. But what he taught me was this absolute adoration for, and twisting sounds like a negative thing, but twisting words around and puns. And why they always say puns are the lowest form of humor? No, screw that. They're not. Because frankly, it takes a degree of wit. Yes, cleverness and wit to do proper punning. It's so funny. But I've been literally had a friend look at me and go, oh, how punny. And it was clearly, I thought, You need to get off your NPR high horse for just a minute, man, and just listen to this pun. It's hilarious. Although I listen to NPR too. So I'm really fascinated by this. So I want to get back to I want to get to what we kind of led in with Harlan Ellison, if I could. Okay.
Oh, please.
This is interesting to me, this performative aspect that you have put into your poetry. Okay, just please lay it on me. What is typewriter poetry? How'd you get started? What's it all about?
Oh, well, I started a few years ago, and it was because someone in Denver emailed me and said, "Hey, I saw that you're a poet in Denver. Do you do typewriter poetry at weddings?" Like, they assumed because I was a poet, like maybe I might do this grader thing. I don't know. And I was like, I don't, or in my mind, I was like, I don't do that, but I should. Sign me up. So I was like, yeah, of course I do that. Of course. And I bought a 1964 Smith Corona baby blue typewriter on
Sweet.
eBay for like $100, working condition. Like, it's beautiful. And I showed up at this event. This lovely couple was getting married. And I sat down at the table and I was like, oh yeah, people just give me a word and I'll like type a poem. I'm pretty quick, like in the moment for writing. So I sit down, I have my little thing that's like typewriter poet. And, it's really the typewriter that makes people come over to me. Because they're like, ooh, what is going on here? So they come over and they go like, what is this all about? And I go, okay, like give me a word or tell me a story and I'll turn it into a poem for you. And they're like, really? And I'm like, yeah. And then you get to take it home. And they're like, okay. So I write the poem. They have it in a minute. I hand it to them. They read it. Sometimes they cry. Sometimes they share it with someone else. I get pictures all the time of it, like framed or on a fridge. And yeah, I just kind of like, I started doing that, and it's like great money because like weddings and like corporate parties, like people love it. And I've been invited to like happy hours at restaurants. Like people just eat this stuff up. And I really loved that it made poetry collaborative, because I think for me, it's great to get inspiration from other people. Like this romantic notion of like being in your own head, like let's get rid of that. Like I can be inspired by the person sitting in front of me. And then for that person, sorry, my dog just entered the room. And then for that person, they're like, oh my gosh, someone just like listened to me well, like, actually listened to what I was saying and then turned it into art. Like, how cool is that? So yeah, I love it. It's so much fun. And then I turned the concept kind of into a podcast, which has
really? Tell me
been
more.
it's been on hiatus since COVID started, because I like to do it in person because of the intimacy, but it's called Poems for People. And I interview people about their lives, like where they are right now. And the interviews are usually like 20, 30 minutes. And then afterwards I say, okay, I'm ready to write my poem. And I write in front of them the poem, and then they read it out loud for all the listeners to hear it.
That's really great. I love that.
Yeah. It's people love the podcast, and it's been, I record it in person because it's so cool to have like, they're sitting there in front of the typewriter, like watching it happen. Like the typewriter keys on the podcast are like a magical sound. Right. And yeah, it's just been doing that virtually is hard to recreate that. So once things start to settle down, I'll get back to kind of season 2 of Poems for People.
I'm looking forward to that. And thinking about you saying the intersection of how the typewriter really does set the scene. And because if you'd sat at that same wedding with a laptop, people would just think you're a jerk. Because are you really working?
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. There's something very in the moment about it. And I think too, it makes it more purposeful for me and for the other person, because it's such a physical action. Yeah. Of just like typing keys, and it's so purposeful. I love, obviously I write my poetry books and stuff on the computer, but I just love like slamming the keys down, and it's fun.
You have any trouble finding ribbons for that Smith Corona, by the way?
No. There's actually, you can buy a universal ribbon on Amazon, and there's some great Etsy creators who make ribbon, and you can get like rainbow colored, you can get like any color ink you want for a typewriter. It is insane.
You can't see it, listeners, although Rachel can. See this little object right there? That is my old Smith Corona from forever ago. You want to see it?
Yeah, please.
I'm breaking the wall here, listeners.
Please.
It's actually not a Smith Corona. I used to have a Smith, but this is my old Remington.
Oh, it's a beauty.
Isn't she a gorgeous?
She is. Work of art. Oh, shucks.
And I have this one, and I also have one of my grandpa's old typewriters, which is a Smith.
I love it.
But it's interesting. I just lost an uncle about a couple of months ago, and thank you. And he was a fan of my work. And when they were clearing out his things, I heard they found an old manual typewriter, which I got my eye on. I'm pretty sure nobody else wants it, so I think it'll probably find a home eventually.
You're like, I'm taking that one.
Yeah, and my sister's all like, I kind of think you might want this when we see you again. So, it's interesting. Just one more thing with Harlan Ellison. So people got suspicious of him when he was plotting out stories in advance, and he began soliciting premises like you do. You solicit a premise from people, basically, right? Mm-hmm. Well, in 2002, at the Booksmith in San Francisco, Robin Williams gave him the springboard Computer Vampire. So Ellison, who disliked working with computers, grunted but wrote a story keyboard anyway. It's just interesting though that he raised some charitable funds, brought a lot of attention to writing, but he also, to my mind, helped set the stage for this kind of typewriter poetry stuff we're talking about here, because writers very rarely, aside from when we're asked to read our work, and of course, poets, I think, are asked to read their work more than prose, probably, I would assume. It's just so rare that we get to perform. And not all of us, I think, are introverts who just sit in a room. And I don't know if you can tell, but I'm not that introverted, So
I sense that.
Yeah. So my only problem is, so here's one more question for you on that, though, on the typewriter thing. Do you know how to type, or do you hunt and peck?
I hunt and peck because the keys are so heavy. I could sit here all day on my laptop. I could have full conversations with my wife and type. And she's like, are you actually listening to me? I'm like, yes, I'm actually listening to you. I have the keyboard memorized. But with how heavy those keys, the thing weighs probably 30 pounds.
Oh, gosh.
You want me to go get it? It even has a carrying case.
Get out. I'd love to see it. Give me a second. It's okay. She is going to go get it. And sorry, folks, but you get two typewriter junkies together. We're gonna do this. So this is great. But let's see what we got with Ray. Oh my God, it's huge.
Here's the suitcase that it comes in. Wow. Yeah.
It looks like a Samsonite.
Oh yeah, and it clips into the case, so it's like secure. So I imagine people like taking this thing to work, like, oh my God, And then hold on.
Here she goes. This is so great. She's pulling it out of there. Oh my God. And folks, it's like a Samsonite suitcase. It's huge. It's gray, and you'd recognize it right off. It's like circa 1970s looking luggage. Oh,
this thing.
Gorgeous baby blue. Oh man, that is a gorgeous, gorgeous machine. Thank you for showing me that. That's so great.
No, but she's so pretty, but I swear, like, sometimes I walk down the street with it because I'm like walking into an event and people are like, what you got in there? And I'm like, a typewriter. And they're like, what? And I'm like, yeah, but I'm like also usually like dressed up. I'm like, if someone tried to like come at me for any reason, I would just like, because you could totally kill someone with this. It's so heavy. So the keys too are very heavy. They're very heavy keys. So I do have to hunt and peck. I wish I didn't, but it doesn't.
I love it. So I would imagine though that these happy events like happy hours and weddings and stuff like that, people get a little liquored up, and can it be uncomfortable? Does anybody ever kind of abuse the privilege, so to speak, or is it all pretty cool and good fun?
It's all like great fun. Actually at that first wedding event, this woman sat down, a bridesmaid, so I assume she might have been a little liquored up by the time we met each other. She sat down, she goes, oh, this is so cool, I gotta tell you something. And I was like, oh dear, oh God, okay, let's go. And she told me about this like horrible Tinder date that she'd gone on. Like people get really personal. So, if you just met a random stranger, they would not sit down next to you. Like, even if you were at, a coffee shop or a bar and you're sitting there, you might be like, hey, what's up? But like, you wouldn't say like, hey, what's up? You want to hear about this crazy thing that happened to me. But for some reason, when there's a typewriter there, it just like cracks people open. Like I have heard stories about, so another wedding that I was at, this woman came out to me and she's like, Rachel, I'm like having this very weird experience because I'm so happy for this couple. I'm surrounded by so many of my oldest friends right now, but my best friend back home is getting her like third cancer treatment and might die.
Oh. Oh.
So she was having these such dueling feelings, but I'm sitting there and I'm like, oh my God, like, these people are having a constant experience, and something about the typewriter just makes them talk about it. And it is such a privilege to be on the end of that. And then I feel so like humbled to like give them something that maybe can capture the moment or give them some like clarity or whatever that is,
It's so fascinating that such a relatively, and I say this lovingly about it, a clunky machine becomes this bridge to intimacy between strangers.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, just the same way that some very sharp scissors in the hands of a good listener who's cutting your hair can create an intimacy, or a bartender who makes a really nice drink and looks you in the eye when she serves it to you. You know what I'm saying there?
Yeah. So much trust. It's crazy.
It is crazy how much trust. And gosh, you know what? If this starts rolling again, I'm not a poet though. Shoot, I might try to do the Harlan Ellison thing though. Just somebody give me a premise and I'll write you a short story while I'm sitting there in a window. I want to try this because I used to be an actor and stuff. I kind of miss getting out there. I want to talk about your work now. I love the fun stuff you're doing here. Now you've got some books of poetry collections. You want to tell us a little bit about them?
Absolutely. So my last collection, At War with Stars, is I think the best thing I've ever written so far. It comes out of kind of my experience in a master's program. So, being pushed in creative ways and by people who are very, very good at what they do, as far as teaching and as far as poetry. Some of my professors are, very well known in that aspect. And, I was really kind of experimenting with form. And at the same time, it was a really big year for me when I was writing that, because I was, finishing up school. I was changing kind of career trajectory. And, I just met like the love of my life, who's my now wife. So there were so many things happening that were so substantial. So I constantly kind of felt myself sitting back and being like, whoa, like, how do I appreciate all of this chaos and like all of this beautiful things that are happening in my life? And so it's really rooted in nature and obviously kind of inspired by like living in Colorado, but it's about kind of examining our sense of place in the world and the questions that we ask of the universe and the answers that we get back and how that impacts who we are on a daily basis. But I love it. I think my readers love it. It's definitely a turn away from Instagram poetry, right? I am an Instagram poet, whatever that means. I try to post on there every day. Like, I love the audience that I have there. I love the network of poets that's on Instagram. Like, I now have a writing group on Clubhouse, and we meet together like weekly to do like workshops and writing. So it's been an amazing network for me. But yeah, I mean, this book was definitely a nurture of love. And I'm now very aggressively working on my fourth one. And I'm very excited about it. It's called I Made You a Playlist. And I'm trying to do something, like the typewriter poetry. It's not like transactional. Like, it's this whole emotional experience. And what I want to do with this next collection is, how do I make it more interactive, right? You read my poetry, you like my poetry, you buy the book, you're done. Like, you're not done. You might reach out to me. You might, post it on Instagram. You might, whatever. Sometimes I get great emails. Like, that's wonderful. But then it kind of stops there. So I'm like, how do I continue this experience? So I've made a playlist that goes along with each poem. So the book comes with a playlist on Spotify that people will be able to follow me and like listen to the song and get into the mode of like where I was. And there's like a side A, a side B. So like one is, heartbreak, and one is like falling in love. And it kind of takes you back to all those different tumultuous experiences. And it's very kind of nostalgic. And again, I'm in this place right now where I'm like, I'm obviously very happy, found my human, but can now like really look back and examine the mistakes, the heartbreak, the trial, the excitement. I think I have like kind of I can kind of look outside the box and like dive back into those emotions in a way that is not like traumatic.
Yeah.
You know? And I'm so excited about it. It's like halfway done, and I'm hoping that it will be out probably August. I'm hoping.
Oh,
Yeah.
You'll let us know, right?
Oh yeah, I'll definitely let you know. But
yeah.
I'm already like planning out the cover, like all the creative stuff. I want to do like a mini podcast that goes with it to like talk about the different motivations. Like I just want it to be a more interactive experience with people.
Yeah.
And
Well,
I'm working on it.
That sounds like, that's the thing too, is that you're just, it's okay. Far as I know, okay, admittedly, I'm not steeped in the poetry world, but you're just blowing away all of these stereotypes I think people have of poetry and poets these days.
I'm trying.
So this is a question I love to ask folks who do things that I don't quite have a full grasp of. What do people get wrong about poetry? People who are just see it on a Hallmark card. What do people get wrong about poetry? And I don't mean that in a negative context, but just what is the thing that's misunderstood about poetry, perhaps?
You know, I think that now that poetry is more accessible, the question that is coming up more often is, you know, is that poetry? That's the question that people are asking. And my answer is, and this isn't necessarily like of my work, but you know, we're all having this conversation. Like, can anyone go on the internet and like, you know, type out a quote that, or something that has resonated with them or happened that day and label it poetry, right? And my thing as an artist is I've always said, you know, who am I to do this thing? Like, I am just a person in Denver who likes to write, and I share it with people, and I'm very aware of the insane privilege I have of being able to do that. And at the same time, you know, there are card games now, and there are things that like have little quotes and tidbits, and people put stuff on billboards, and people say, you know, is that poetry? And you know, if you read anything and it makes you feel something, or it makes you rethink your actions, or it makes you reflect in a better way, then I think it's poetry. You know, because I think a poet's job is to just make people think, make people question, make people, you know, kind of get outside of their own ego a little bit, maybe humble them, you know. Right. It's just meant to stir a change in someone, I think. And it can be the smallest little shift. But I think if you read something and it does that to you, then it is poetry.
It doesn't all have to be one of my favorite quotes from poetry, John Greenleaf Whittier. What was it? The saddest words of tongue and pen are perhaps, or I'm paraphrasing, it might have been. I mean, it's simple, but of course it's from another age, but it still speaks to me very much because I'm at an age in my life where there's been a lot of it might have beens. Just 20 years, lost someone very close to me, and it was just 20-year anniversary on February 3rd, and I forgot. And it was just a couple of days ago, and I realized it, and I felt like I had somehow let her down because I forgot 20 years, as if 20 years matters to someone who's passed, as if 20 years matters to this universe where it's not even a blink of an eye, but it still did that. So when I think of a poem like that, or if I hear those words, it instantly connected me to her. So I think I want to illustrate what you said, how it affects me with poetry.
Yeah, no, it's these little moments, right? And it's all these little moments that, you know, pivotal things like that you carry with you through your life. And I think poetry can do that for people in a number of capacities, and being able to, I think the simplest of words can capture some of the most profound emotions. And two, for some of us that, you know, don't have the words, sometimes it's nice to have someone say like, hey, this might help. You know, or I don't know. People reach out to me all the time and they're like, wow, this one really like got me today because XYZ. I'm like, well, first of all, thank you for reaching out to me. Like, I'm glad this resonated with you. Like, when I write a poem, I have no idea how someone else interprets it. And it's not my job to tell them what it's about either, you know?
Right.
And people take on the meaning and then they reach out to me, and it's a really cool thing to be able to like help someone get through something, or to help someone put words to an emotion that they've been trying to figure out. It's pretty neat.
You have obviously the academic underpinnings here. I mean, you've clearly. So I wonder if I could ask this question: Do you in the academic world of poetry and the fine arts, and I mean, it's not all good though, right? Not all poetry is good. In fact, there's a whole industry devoted to bad poetry. But you said something a minute ago, though. You're just like, but if it affects you, even if it's bad, does that make the poem good? Or are you like, Alex, stop reaching?
No, I don't think it makes the poem good. I mean, I think there are poems that you come back to and you revisit. You know, I have authors, you know, like I love Robert Creeley. I love Ben Lerner. He's a very modern poet. You know, like there are poets that I continue to come back to because their voices speak to me most. And I think you can read a poem and you can say, oh, I get what the author's doing here. I like this line. I hate everything else. Like, you know, and I mean, it's kind of like, don't we, you know, I like this salad dressing. I hate this salad dressing, but I can still appreciate that, you know, you might like ranch on French fries. Like, you know, it's nominal, but you know, there are probably people that really like that poem. So like, let them like it. I don't care. Like, you're reading poetry and you're reading and you're thinking about things, and that is good for the universe, you know?
That's so true. That is so true. I think poetry, people get hung up. I think they do. And I mean, I think people get hung up on just even reading it at first because they just feel like the barrier to entry. That's why I like reading great prose that to me is like poetry. Jim Harrison, the late Jim Harrison, one of my favorite writers, when he writes about food, it's as if it's poetry. I mean, I can't even get through an essay. I've got books of his essays. I can't get through them without stopping. And used to be I use a pencil, but now I just shoot a picture of it with my phone and I tweet it out and I go, Jim Harrison was a god. I mean, this is so great. So I love that I think all humans can be moved by words if you have the patience and you're seeking understanding. So I think that's fascinating. So you've got several books here. I even see that one of your books was a Kickstarter project.
It was. I loved that project. It was called Closet Haikus, and I was trying to write. The project started because I was like, okay, how do I talk to people about coming out, like all the good things and the bad things about it, but make it accessible to people so that like someone who may know nothing about being in the LGBTQ plus community could like get something from it. I was like, haikus. Who doesn't love a haiku? Like, you'd have to be like a savage, right? Like, haikus are clever and funny and they're witty and they're punny and they're short and sweet. Like, you don't have to get like too boggled down. You know, they're just so accessible. So I start writing them and I'm like, all right. Like, I got like 30 poems in and I was like, I thought they were hilarious. My friends thought they were hilarious too, because they were just, they're such like snapshots of moments, of little things. And I was like, there are so many other people out there who have stories to tell. And how do I help that? So I started the Kickstarter project. If you contributed to the project, you know, people sent me their coming out stories and I put it into a poem. So I would say, you know, give me the first time you realized this, give me a bad breakup, give me a conversation with family, you know, just give me like 150 words. And I took those and I turned them into individual haikus. And then I published a book. So it's a collaborative coming out poetry collection for the LGBTQ plus community. And it's pretty cool. And a percentage of profits we donated to the Trevor Project and the Human Rights Campaign. And it was just such a fun way to access this audience that, you know, for a while I didn't want to be like shoved into a box as like just a gay poet, you know?
Right.
It's like one small part of my life and it's a great part, but I didn't want to turn off people who might be like, oh, I can't read your poetry because you're gay. And if I relate to that, that's scary for me. Or, you know, like I don't, like there's a lot of implications there, I think, that can happen.
Well, I guess I hadn't even thought of it that way. Actually, the other way may be just as a straight cis white dude, old middle-aged white dude, it's like they don't want me reading their poetry kind
or
of
that
thought
too.
comes in.
Yeah. Yeah. I think they're
it's not, or it's not for you, man. Thanks so much. Appreciate your interest. Not for you. But that's not the case, is it?
Exactly. No. And I want everyone, I think everyone can get something out of my poetry. But I was like, okay, I do have this audience, and how do I speak to them, and how do I give them a voice? Because I had a lot of people who are, 15, 16, sending me stories. And that's pretty cool. Like someone living in that moment. Like I remember being 15 and dealing with this, like, very much so. So if I can, help elevate those voices, and two, when they get their free copy, because they contributed, they get to see all these other stories of people that are happening. And, they're not alone. People aren't alone. This isn't just like, and it can feel that way, as I'm
sure
visible as this world is now. Right. Yeah. I love doing that project. It was
you're
really
not
fun.
alone, and you're heard. And I had done Kickstarter on one of my books, and it was a great experience. It's a lot of work, but if at the time I did it, it wasn't so easy to get a book out there unless you were traditionally published, and it was just harder. So yeah, it's fun. I was one of the first to do that. And then I wrote a little ebook about how I did it, which is like 8 or 9 years. It's like 8 or 9 years old now. And people get mad. They read the book and they don't look that it was written in 2012. And I get these reviews or these comments like, this is so outdated. How dare you? I'm like, sorry, I don't know what to tell you. I don't have a time
machine. Check the publishing date. Like
Rachel, as we sadly wrap up, are you still doing From Whispers to Roars?
I am, and we are taking submissions. They close tonight at midnight. So last time I checked, we have about 170. We usually land about 200 per submission period, which is really cool. So yeah, I'm definitely still doing that. The submission period is open for the first issue of 2021. So.
Right. And you're the editor-in-chief and founder. It's an arts and lit mag. And as I'm just reading, founded on the idea that artists should have communities for exchange and growth. So I think that's great. We're going to put a link in the show notes on that, if that's okay.
No, please. Yeah. I love that project because it was when I first really started getting into writing, and I was kind of discovering my entrepreneurial spirit, which now has taken me in like a million directions, and I love it. I woke up from a nap one day at Christmas and I was like, how do I engage the writing community?
Yeah.
Because a lot of people are sharing writing online, but they're not talking about it, and they're not workshopping, and they're not showing any like behind the scenes. Like it's really easy to post a picture on the internet. The work that goes into that is a lot harder, right?
Right.
So I was like, okay, how do I create a space, specifically for indie artists and poets who, need to get their foot in the door in this world that is very complicated when you start approaching, traditional publishing. And it's pretty awesome. I get a report every month. We had 200,000 people visit our website last month, which was like insane. I attribute that to my marketing expertise, which is cool. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
I know. Everyone laughs and people think I'm lying. And then, so people are like, people, why do I have to pay for submissions? And I go, well, first of all, like running a magazine costs money, like the tools that we have to use to get submissions, we pay out contest fees. Like there's a lot of admin stuff that goes on. And, also you get exposure, and they're like, well, what kind of exposure? And I just send them the screenshot of the Google Analytics, and they're like, oh, okay.
Okay. Yeah. And okay, this is again, reminder, a lit magazine that gets this kind of traffic. So just, yeah. And I know we're not really talking about this much, but so your day job, so to speak, not that you really have one, I guess. What is this? So GMB Pirate, is that you? Is that what you're up to?
Yeah. I work in marketing. So I work for a couple of agencies, but GMB Pirate is kind of my newest venture. And we help local businesses get on Google Maps, and then we optimize their listing. But as far as From Whispers to Roars, I really started in marketing because of content writing, which then leads naturally to SEO. Right. So I've SEO'd the hell out of From Whispers to Roars, and I have big plans for the year coming. I'm going to start doing more like interviews with authors and resources and all this cool stuff. But yeah, the SEO on the From Whispers to Roars website is what has really it's boosted our interactions. It gets there are tons of people just like looking for arts magazines, and we are one of them. Which is pretty cool.
Rachel, I feel just so blessed to have met you today because
Oh, likewise. What a great way to start my day. This is awesome.
Oh, it's my pleasure. As I cruise into lunchtime, here we go. I've just got to say, as just whatever limits I may have, but as a creative person myself, somebody who is not just creating, but also helping create safe spaces for others to create, and helping people who aren't creators, but help them deal with who they are, and asking questions and questing about their lives. I just think that you're a delightful person, and you're doing such wonderful things. Probably the least of which, although the most fun, is the typewriter poetry. I mean, that's probably just the fun thing you do. That's the cocktail party,
so
Rachel.
Fun. It's the best.
But it is so great. We're going to put links in the show notes, but I think the best home base is that R Noall, is that right?
Yeah, rrnoall.com. You can reach out to me through there. You can see all my publications. I got news yesterday. I never wanted to be a nonfiction short story writer, but I have a piece coming out in Litro magazine. I think it's coming out this weekend, actually. And it's called NYC DNA, and it's a story about how we buried my grandpa in Central Park. So I'm just going to leave that there because your jaw drop is telling me exactly what I needed to hear. It's like a story that's so close to my heart, and it's just a one-pager, but I'm really excited about that coming out. But yeah, and anyone can find any of my published work. I have a couple stories in there and all my books and all that stuff. And feel free to reach out to me. I'm try to be a really accessible person, and I always respond to emails and messages on Twitter. I'm going to follow you on Twitter. And watch your banter. I can't wait. But yeah,
I get in ruts sometimes. Just bear with me.
It's okay. I'll help you through them.
Thank you. All right. Likewise, if I can. Rachel, tell you what, the door is always open if you want to come back. I think we just scratched the surface on stuff we could gab about. And honestly, thank you so much for making my day really bright. And I hope you enjoyed it too. And don't forget to go to mgopod.com to look for all of her links. And of course, they'll be in the show notes wherever you're listening to this thing. But mgopod.com has the extra stuff and ways for you to buy the show t-shirt and mug and all that stuff. I mean, Rachel, merchandising, am I doing it right or no?
I think so. I really like your merch. Honestly, I do. Because I was looking at it before we jumped on, and I'm trying to get into that world, but I'm trying to find out how to do it sustainably because I'm just very busy. So I might actually, pick your brain a little bit about that.
Oh, well, you bet, but if you do, it'll never heal. Rachel Noall, thanks so much for being with us here on Mysterious Goings On.
Thank you, Alex. I appreciate you.
Thanks so much for listening to Mysterious Goings On. Don't forget we have a complete archive of all of our interviews, monologues, updates, live readings, dead readings. All of that stuff is available at mgopod.com. And of course, don't forget to subscribe to us so you never miss an episode. We're on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, all the usual suspects. Please join us there. Again, don't forget, mgopod.com also has links where to find me on social media and how to get in touch in case you want to be a guest here on the show. Well, I think it's time that I move on for this week, but until next time, keep reading. Been there, done that, got the t-shirt, huh? Not quite, Mysterious Goings On listeners. You probably haven't got the brand new Mysterious Goings On official t-shirt. This is a quality cotton t-shirt coming in a premium unisex tee version and a women's slim fit tee version in all the sizes you could possibly need. These are great quality shirts coming in a variety of colors, including dark heather gray, black, charcoal, maroon. And on the women's t-shirt, we come in dark heather gray, black, charcoal, indigo, and midnight navy. There you go. Check them out. They are in the show notes. The link is right there. They're being sold on Bonfire. They're typically sold in batches, and they'll come at you pretty quickly. All the instructions are on the website. The link is in the show notes here or at mgopod.com. Again, show the world, well, at least show the world on Zoom, or show the world when we can finally really get out and about. Show the world that you have some mysterious goings-ons of your own. by wearing our t-shirt and help support this show. Thank you so much.